What's up, Internet? It is the first time in about a year and a half we've done one of these. There's a good reason for that, and that is that at the start of this year, I lost my job. Jazz hands. Seriously, it's kind of hard to fund new games for the show and the series and stuff when I don't have an income, and finding work has been rather hard for me because that's just kind of how life is. Feel free to support the Patreon to help make that a little easier for me. Thanks. But super awesome friend of the show, Jet Wolf, hooked us up with a big awesome box that's so big it doesn't even fit in the camera shot. But the point remains, it's here. And because of that, I think we can sort of finally have enough games for both an unboxing in the Super Mystery Box and like a proper loot video, so here we are. Because I have a terrible memory, I don't actually know what's in this box. Jet Wolf's probably told me over the past 2 years or so when he was sort of packing this together to send it to me, but I have a terrible memory, so I probably won't remember half the stuff in here, but it might jog my memory. There might be some interesting stories. Let's see what happens. I'm gonna pull stuff out completely blindly. Let's see what we've got. So we are starting off with this. It's got a big number 2 on it. Okay, I think I know what this is. Jet Wolf kind of sort of half mentioned this to me on Discord a little while ago, but he said it was a game with the number 3 on the cover. Maybe he mistyped it, meant 2, but he had a bunch of like Japanese quiz games that he wanted to rip the audio from, and he didn't have any use for the game itself, so he just decided to throw it in. He mentioned that, assuming this is the one I think it is, that this one was a little bit different. It had like a bunch of mini games, and it looks like there are, in fact, a bunch of mini games on this. So that's cool. I kind of want to try playing like a quiz game with no real perspective on what I'm doing. This might be the one worth going through, but yeah. So I think this is a weird random quiz game thing. I think there might be a couple of those. All right, pulling in at random, our second game, we have the, followed by some stuff I don't know, but it's a simple 1500 game. If you're not familiar with these, it was a series of games for the PS1 that were 1500 yen, or about $15. They were super budget games. That's where stuff like Top Shop came from, and later on with the PS2, that's where stuff like Oni-chan Bara and EDF came from. So I do have a fascination with the simple series. I want to collect these. I have no idea what this one is, so let's take a look at this. I'm not sure how clear this is going to look on camera, but it looks offhand a little bit like Hanafuda, which is one of the Japanese sort of games I'm not familiar with. Like, I know Mahjong enough to do the basics, to play like a very basic game if it's simplified enough, and I have a 100% victory rate on Shogi. That's not an exaggeration either. I've played one game of Shogi and I won, but it was on a game that was programmed by a Shogi master, so I guess I am sort of good at Shogi, maybe. But Hanafuda, I'm down for trying this. Why not? And it gets more simple series games into my collection, and I do have a fascination with them, and my PS1 collection is rather lacking. Alright, our next thing we have is a spine card, which presumably is for that guy. I'm not really sure what the deal with spine cards are. I know people tend to pay more if a game comes with one, but I genuinely don't really understand why people value them. Okay, so the next game we have is this, Guardian Force. Now, I am a Saturn guy. I'm not familiar with this game, but Jet Wolf does know his Saturn games, and if he includes it, you know it's going to be good. This looks like some kind of tank-based shoot-'em-up. I'm not sure what this is, but I think I might have to play this sometime soon. This looks cool. But I don't think we ever talked about Guardian Force. That's a game I'm not terribly familiar with. Okay, we got a layer of bubble wrap. Feeling my way through. Okay, we've got something that feels kind of PS2 box-ish, and we have, whoa, Shining Force 3. Holy cow. this is completely serendipitous, but I just made a video on Shining Force a little while ago. It's possibly the best video in terms of like channel numbers I've ever gotten over the, as of that point, exactly 400 videos. It was an anniversary video, I didn't even realize it. And I've been doing this for about 11 years. That's the best video I've ever made. It's based on Shining Force, so this is a sequel to that. And I'm quite passionate about Shining Force, but the thing is, even though I am passionate about Shining Force and I am a Sega Saturn guy, I'm actually not familiar with Shining Force 3 all that much. Like, I know this is the PAL box art, which I think is objectively nicer than the box art that the West and Japan got, which is the same box art, just sort of stretched. But I think this is a much nicer box art. Now, it says Scenario 1 through 3 here, which is the one thing I know about Shining Force, which is that it was actually released as 3 games. You had Shining Force Scenario 1, 2, and 3. Each and every one of these was sort of a... it was too big for one disc, so they sold it as a trilogy, sort of. They never sold it as a single box set, and the fact that this says CDR tells me this is probably unofficial, which means I might have to do some work to get my Saturn to run it. I don't think Saturn games natively run CDRs, but I'm not gonna lie, this is unbelievably cool. I love Shining Force. I've never played or really know anything about Shining Force 3. This is gonna be a must play for me. I'm gonna have to find a way to get this running like ASAP, because this is unbelievable for me. Okay, what do we got here? We have more plastic, more plastic, more plastic. Oh, I got something. It's small. It feels like a GBA cart. We have a GBA cart. What GBA cart is it, though? It's Hachiman. Holy crap. Okay, so I actually was talking to Jet Wolf about this. This is a really neat game. You play as this little, like, knockoff Tamagotchi thing, and it's a fairly basic platformer, but you've got these giant lips, and your whole thing is, like, you grapple and drag yourself along using your lips. Your character has, like, a cute little butt in his animations, because for some reason it was important to make sure everyone knew that this little Tamagotchi thing has a butt, and your whole goal is to, like, kiss enemies and stuff. It's weird. It's bizarre. It's a pretty simple platformer, but it's an absolute must-have import. It's also really hard to find and expensive. So this might have to be a priority to play for me, because I'm really excited about Hachiman. This is a game I've wanted to play forever. This is really cool. I'm excited about this. Okay, so what do we have next? We have, it feels small CD case-ish. We have this. The Psychological Game 3. Maybe this is the game number 3 he meant? It looks like it's got some mini games on it as well, but it might be some kind of quiz-looking thing. I'm not sure how playable this will be, but like I said, I really want to try playing Japanese quiz games, just for seeing how far I can get, even if I'm just randomly selecting stuff. So I'm not sure how playable this will be for me. Also, I'm dumb, so puzzle games, if this is psychological and deductive based, I might be screwed, but I am willing to try. I'm interested in this. Okay. Our next game de jour is going to be this thing. I have no earthly clue what this is. It looks vaguely quiz-ish, though, meets sort of visual novel-y. I don't really have anything to say beyond that. It doesn't have an English name on the side. Some of the Japanese games tend to. But yeah, maybe this is another one of those like weird quiz games he included. I'm willing to check it out. We'll see how far we can get in this. Okay, so next we have... It's a small box. We are pulling out... Ooh! We have an Assault Kingdom Hammurabi. This is a small little Zeta Gundam toy based on the enemy mobile suit that was a bit like a Stingray. And also this would, I think, technically be considered a food item. That might confuse you. If you go and buy a lot of like weird Japanese tiny little miniature toys, you might find that they come with like a little tiny chiclet inside the boxes, and the reason for that, as I understand, is that it gets classified as a food item as opposed to a toy, and it gets taxed differently, so it's basically just a tax dodge. So if you've ever wondered why your little Japanese toys came with a chiclet, that's why. It's taxes, basically. But I actually do have an Assault Kingdom. In fact, I've got two. I've got a Zeta Gundam and a Mark II, and now I've got a thing to fight with them, so that's cool. I do like the Assault Kingdoms. They're nice, just little figures. In fact, I have that Mark II right there, except mine is the Titans color. So yeah, we've got the cool little Stingray, probably one of the more unique enemies in Zeta Gundam. I am all for that. And now I've got an enemy for my Zeta to fight, so that's cool. Alright, so we got some more plastic to get through. Let's see what we've got next. Oh yeah, okay, he was talking about this game. Okay, so this is Logic Pro Adventure. And if I remember correctly, this game looks like the most generic, like, budget title. And it is, as I understand, like, really hard to find, very expensive, and it's, like, really, really good. If the box art can't tell you what this is already, it's sort of a, a Picross style game, where you have a series of numbers next to a grid, sort of like Minesweeper, and you use the numbers to deductively figure out where you need to X out and where you need to drop colors, or blank squares, so that you can make an image. So in this case, the puzzle reveals that there is a snail. I like pictogram-based puzzles. Like, I am a moron, so being able to do this sort of thing will be very, very difficult for me, but I don't know why. I do like pictogram puzzles, just because I like the idea of revealing a picture that's sort of hidden from the world, you know? And this is a pretty good game from what I hear. Hard to find, though. And like I said, it kind of comes across as sort of a budget title, but it's kind of anything but, if I remember correctly, from what I've researched on it. Okay, next game feels PS1-ish as well, except it's not. Okay. I'll be right back. One sec. I have to get something to introduce this. Okay, so a couple months ago, I kind of serendipitously kind of ran into a little bit of money just through random stuff lining up properly. Doesn't happen much in my life. And I decided now was the time to get my Sega Saturn replaced, because I bought a satiator forever ago and it just didn't seem to work. And I figured, well, it's new tech meeting old tech, so the old tech is probably what's not working. I did get my new Saturn, and it was about $30, $40. Super, super cheap for a functional Saturn. And the satiator still doesn't work, so I'm in contact with them, hoping to get a replacement or a repair or something, because that thing is so unbelievably expensive. But when you order something from Japan, like my Saturn, you tend to have to pay like a stupid amount of shipping to ship even a single thing, but it's like on a weird tiered level. So once you pay shipping for one thing, you can add like 10 things and then it's fine. And then if you add an 11th, you have to pay like an extra $100 to ship. Shipping from Japan is kind of weird like that. So if you buy one thing, you tend to have to buy multiple things. And I was looking around to see if I could get any more Saturn games from this one seller, just so that I could, you know, make use of the extra insane amount of shipping I was paying. And they didn't have any Saturn games. But in a couple of days, they were going to have an interesting little piece of tech for sale for a really, really cheap price. We're talking a console that would normally cost $400 to like $600, selling for $50-$60. And I decided, you know what, this is a particular console I've been looking into for a while now. I was very interested in it. It's a console I actually don't know anything about, and that's what makes this all exciting for me. I decided to put the bid in, and I did actually win myself. I'm not sure how this will fit, but an NEC PC Duo R. Now, if you're not familiar with what this is basically the Japanese PC Engine and PC Engine CD attachment, plus like a memory expansion, all thrown into one. Or using the English names TurboGrafx and Turbo CD, although I've never seen any actual like Western TurboGrafx stuff. I mean, it's a running joke that I don't even think they exist. But this was a console that I now had, and I got it for an absurdly cheap sum of money. I think with that in my Saturn, I paid maybe $150, which is ridiculous. And the thing is, when you have a new piece of kit, you have to test it out. Unfortunately, I didn't have any games for the thing, and PC Engine games, especially PC CD games, even the crap ones, tend to be about $150, and I barely had enough money to be able to buy these two consoles just to, you know, because I had a little bit of money in my account at the time. And I was trying to kind of pursue any sort of way to get any sort of cheap game, but even the cheapest stuff is unbelievably expensive. I was reaching out to someone who offered to send me a free copy of a PC Engine game, but I was a couple months late and they gave it away already, which I'm kind of gutted about. I was very excited about it, but I figured it was a long shot and wasn't going to happen. But I decided to turn to Jet Wolf, because if nothing else, he knows his games, and I don't know this console, so even if I have to pay some money in the future and just assume my console works before I can test it, you know, what games should I look for? Is there anything good that's super, super cheap? And he came back to me and he offered me a little bit of information on some games. He's still sending me links to really, really good games I'm actually genuinely interested in, but he said to me that he had this one PC Engine CD game he bought entirely because it came with a soundtrack CD, because he's a big soundtrack guy. And he just wanted the soundtrack CD. He didn't have a PC Engine CD to play the game, so if he could keep the soundtrack CD, he'd be fine with sending me the game, and that's more than fair. That's incredibly generous. So here it is, CD Dengen, or Super Air Zonk. And this is interesting to me for two reasons. First of all, this now means that 60% of my experience with this series is all thanks to Chet Wolf, because he sent me Super Bonk 2 many, many years ago. But also, this is actually a different game than I thought it was going to be. And by that I mean, I knew there was a Zonk game, as this was called in North America, on the TurboGrafx. And I just thought, okay, this is a CD version of that game. It's just going to be the same game with CD audio. And to be fair, there is a precedent for that. There are quite a few TurboGrafx / Turbo CD games that came out on the CD that were basically identical in terms of visuals and everything, just different audio. It turns out this is basically a sequel to this and a totally different game from what little research I've had for this. And I am genuinely interested in this. So yeah, we've got a sequel to Air Zonk, which was kind of a spin-off of Bonk, featuring his like grandson from the future that's also a robot, except that the games are side-scrolling shooters. So I'm pretty excited about this. I've been meaning to test out my PC Engine, so I think this might be something I'll run a priority on for videos, but looking forward to this. That's very, very cool. And now I actually have some Turbo CD game. So that's cool. I can test my machine out. It'll be awesome. Alright, feeling around. We have... It feels CD-ish. Yes, it is. In fact, this is a really cool game I'm excited to play as well. This is Cyber Egg Battle Champion. And this was a game I saw many years ago on eBay. Right around the time I was starting to collect Japanese PS1 games, because I got a Japanese PS2. And I saw this and it looked like a really interesting game. But I just couldn't find a copy of it that was kind of a good price, you know? And then I ended up forgetting about it, like I do basically everything, because, like I said, my memory's the worst thing ever. Because having an actual memory disorder is a problem. But Jet Wolf a few months ago came back to me and said, hey, you ever hear about this? He showed it off to me and I said, whoa, I was looking at that a couple of years ago. It looked really, really interesting. And he went out of his way to get a copy to try out. And he came back to me and basically said it was like Jumping Flash meets Robo Pit. And I love both of those things. And he said, yeah, you will totally love this game. So he went out and got me a copy of this. I am really excited about this. This is a game I've been wanting to play for years now. And now I've got the option to. So my PS1 collection is growing ever slightly better because of awesome people I know on my channel, which is really how most of my PS1 collection is. Like, seriously, damn near close to 100% of my PS1 collection that's worth talking about I bought from Vermilion, or Jetwolf sent me. So, yeah, I've got a nice communal PS1 collection that's slowly turning into something I can be proud of, and I'm happy about that. Alright, our next game is... I'm not sure what this is offhand. I think I've seen something like this before. I think it's a convenience store simulator. I think. I've seen a game like this on the Saturn forever ago, and it looks a bit like that. So yeah, I think this is a sequel to the Combini, which is a game where you get like your own convenience store and you have to figure out like what to stock it with, like how to manage foot traffic, how to like stock shelves and figure out exactly like where you want your specific items to stock, and like your individual like licenses to sell specific things. I think that's what this is. Looks interesting. It might be a little complicated for me, but it looks interesting, and the box art is clearly using like little paper cutout models, which I think is adorable. So that's cool. I like that. Alright. I do believe this is the last thing in our box of awesome things. Ooh. Okay, yeah, he mentioned this. Okay, we have Ape Escape: The Million Monkeys. I believe this was a Japanese exclusive PS2 game. Jetwolf mentioned this to me a while back. He said that it wasn't really covered on YouTube basically at all, and the people who didn't really give it much of a fair shake. It's got a bit of a learning curve, as I understand. But Jetwolf played through it, and he kind of described it as EDF meets Gotcha Force. And those are two things I'm very, very, very passionate about. So this is amazing. I'm actually not familiar with Ape Escape, though. I played the like minigame in Metal Gear Solid 3 where Snake had to shoot the monkeys, but that was the entire exposure I have to Ape Escape. It's a series I've always wanted to get into, but this one is a Japanese exclusive, and it's not really talked about much, and it looks really interesting. So I'm probably taking the most unconventional way into this series ever, but it's exciting to see. So, yeah. I'd say this is a pretty cool little box of awesome stuff. So once again, big thank you and shoutouts to Jetwolf. I'm definitely excited about Cyber Egg, Logic Pro, CD Genjin, Guardian Force, Hachiman, this, of course, Shining Force. I might have to do some fiddling around to get to work on an actual Saturn, but holy crap. I should stress that, like, I mean, it's December, it's a really stressful kind of crap time of the year just because of how the world works, but just in general, so much has been going wrong in my life right now, and it's been hard to just sort of function on a day-to-day basis just with everything going kind of wrong all at once, and this definitely made my day. This is some really exciting stuff. I am brimming from ear to ear. This is a really amazing Christmas present. And I'm kind of paralyzed with indecision as to what I should talk about first. I want to talk about it all, and I want to do it all right now. Honestly, Shining Force, but that one might take some doing. Either way, thank you, Jetwolf. I will clear this off, and I will go get the games I've been collecting sort of over the past 2 years or so, and we will finish off this video, yeah? Alright, so we are back with things I've collected over like the past 2 years. I have not had time to make a video on yet. Before we get into the games proper, let's start with some V-Pets, because I do like my V-Pets. We have 3 pendulums, starting with the Virus Busters Pen Z. This is a fairly rare virtual pet, primarily just because it's entirely Digimon Heroes, and I think that's boring, and I didn't want one of those. But I saw it for basically nothing, and I figured, you know what, it's rare. Maybe I can sell it in the future, and if nothing else, it means I can get a full collection of them at some point. So I got that. Next we have the Pendulum Color Virus Busters. That's Virus Busters. This is the opposite of that, which is Nightmare Soldiers. I kind of have a sad story about this. I ordered this because I was super excited because it's a Digimon in color, and I didn't get the original Digimon colors, which I kind of want, but they're really expensive now. So I ordered this, and when it arrived, it was broken. like, you could still play it, but the speaker on it was entirely messed up, and no one was willing to refund it or replace it or anything, so I just have a messed up pendulum, which I'm sad about. I can't really enjoy it as much as I would like, but I do have that. And then finally, the one I'm really excited about, we have the Pendulum 20th Beelzemon version, which is like the biggest, most well-stocked Digimon toy out of all of them. And if you're willing to mod it, you can get about 200 monsters on it, but that requires you to like solder some stuff and break some connections. I'm not really comfortable doing that, but this might be one of my favorite Digimon toys I own now. I think I'd put it at number 2 on my favorite list. But those are some Digimon toys I got. And I got them for super cheap. Like, this one normally costs like $500 or $600, and I think I paid like $60 for it, because whoever sold it just didn't know what they were selling, I guess. Either way, onto the game proper. I guess we will start with a continuation of what we did last year, which was that I pretty much spent entirely last year 100% focused on buying Genesis games, because the year prior, right at the end, Sly Boots on the Discord mentioned that, hey, all the Genesis games are just getting ridiculous, so if you want Genesis games, maybe get them now before it's too late. And I made a list of Genesis games, and I pretty much spent all of last year collecting for it. I'm now missing like 25 games on my list, and like 15 of them are just unaffordably expensive. So I think my collection in general has gone from 10 games with maybe 2 good ones to actually being pretty respectable. I would like to do a full Genesis collection video sometime in the near future if I can get a moment of time to do that. So look forward to that, but we've got a couple of games right here. We are going to start with Kid Chameleon. Now, Kid Chameleon is a game that I don't understand. I'm going to set that up right, and hopefully it doesn't fall over again. I don't understand Kid Chameleon. I feel like it's a game that, on paper, with everything about it, I should absolutely love, and I just don't. It's a game that has like a whole mess of levels strewn about in like sort of a giant labyrinth of a bunch of secret exits and alternate routes you can take through to get to different points in sort of like the giant structure of the game itself. You've got a main character that has about 1 million different power-ups and forms that all give different movement and attack options. I should love this game, and I just bounced off this game entirely. I don't get it, but I paid $3 for it, so I figured it was something to add to the collection. Why not get Kid Chameleon? Speaking of games that I have probably a controversial opinion on, Sonic 2! I got this for $1, primarily just because, again, it adds something to my collection, but if I'm being honest, I think Sonic 2's a little overrated and honestly not that good. Like, I think there's a bunch of really bad and awkward design choices in Sonic 2. Like, there's the pit you can jump into as Super Sonic and just be stuck there until your rings run out and then you die. Like, that's just objectively bad, but ignoring that for the moment, there's like springs pointed in the opposite direction to make you go back and waste your time. And there's just a lot of little things in Sonic 2 that just bug me. And, like, there's not that many levels I really like in Sonic 2. Like, I kind of like Hilltop Zone, and I kind of like Aquatic Ruin. I think that's about it. Honestly, like, Sonic 2, I don't enjoy that much. But we can follow that up with Sonic 3, which I think is the best Genesis Sonic game. Like, I've had this weird thing where I've been thinking a lot about Sonic on the Genesis. I grew up with it, and more as time goes on, I'm thinking I liked it a lot less. Because, like, Sonic 2 had 2 levels I really liked. Sonic 1 had maybe 1, really? Sonic and Knuckles had also maybe 1, and had less levels if you wanted to play as Knuckles, which was like the big fancy deal about it. But Sonic the Hedgehog 3, I think, had a huge collection of really cool levels, including my favorite level. Again, probably going to be a controversial opinion, but Hydro City. I loved Hydro City. It's not a perfect game, of course. It had that Barrel of Doom that killed everyone at least once. That's not so good. But just in general, I think Sonic the Hedgehog 3 was probably the most remarkable of the Genesis Sonic games, for me in terms of the gameplay experience. That said, you couldn't play as Knuckles, and that's less good, and to be fair, you had to buy 2 games to get the full experience with Sonic and Knuckles attaching to it. But just from a level-to-level experience, I think Sonic 3 was the best out of the bunch. And it was the only one that actually had a save file on it, and that was kind of cool too. So I'm quite happy I got Sonic 3. Following that up, we kind of have a weird sort of Hail Mary of mine. I did a playthrough of this probably over a year ago now, but we have the Flintstones on the Genesis. Now, the thing is, when I was a kid, I remember renting a Flintstones game. I don't know which Flintstones game, but I rented one. And the thing is, it was a big property, so there's like a whole heck of a lot of them out there. I've got basically the same story with Jurassic Park games. And the thing is, I really liked it, but I couldn't remember which one it was. And Flintstones games just in general tend to be really expensive now, like especially the NES ones. And let's see if I can make that a little less shiny. There we go, better-ish. But okay, now the shininess problem is relatively resolved. But I remember renting a Flintstones game as a kid, but I couldn't remember which one. And they were all getting really, really expensive, especially because the ones on the NES were actually kind of rare. So I decided to kind of throw a Hail Mary and get this and hope it was the one that I played as a kid. The only thing I really remembered about it was that the first level you were looking for Wilma's necklace. And I popped this in on stream, and the first thing I had to do was go find Wilma's necklace. And I was so happy that this was, because this is not a terribly cheap game, but I just had no perspective for what game I was looking for, and I just had memories. And I played this on stream. I almost beat it. I got to, I think, the penultimate level, and it was a very, very difficult, very, very arcadey game that is pretty much an evolution of the NES games. Very good game, up to the penultimate level where they require you to make a blind jump in a couple of frames or you die. That one jump is the only thing I would say don't buy this for, but if you're okay with maybe not finishing it because of one really stupid moment, this is a difficult but really fun, really creative game, and it looks cool. I think this game was really worth the money, and I'm so glad I finally got to find the Flintstones game I played as a kid. Now, following that up, this was the year of the Xbox 360 closure, which of course meant panic buying, like left, right, and center, right? Because they're all going to go up in price an absurd amount. Let's just panic buy everything and hopefully get a collection worth talking about. Let's start with Blades of Time. Many years ago, I got a game called X-Blades or Cross-Blades. I can't remember which it's supposed to be pronounced, and honestly, I don't care. That game was not very good. This is the sequel to it. And it's getting a little bit harder to find. It's not super hard to find, but honestly, it's supposed to be better in every way. The original game was abysmal. But the thing that makes it interesting to me was how they marketed this. See, Konami, as I understand, started advertising that this game was coming through an email blast to pundits. They did this 2 days after it released, and they did so by copy-pasting a message halfway through another message about the game. So their advertising cuts itself off to interrupt itself with itself in the biggest mess ever. And that's the only thing I really remember about this game. But I thought it was funny. I thought that was worth owning it. So I went and tried to find a copy, and that wasn't too expensive. Next we have Fracture. I just sort of had an interest in trying to collect all the weird third-person shooters from the time. I want to get an Inversion, which was the one that had gravity-defying mechanics. I think this was the one that had mechanics where you modify the terrain by pulling and pushing it, sort of like in Red Faction. Although a Red Faction game did end up doing that as well. But that's really all I know about it. It was by LucasArts, back when they existed. Oh, I miss you. Well, now I'm sad. Next we have Quake 4. I got this at a garage sale, literally days before I had to put up my list for the Xbox 360 games you still need to be able to own an Xbox 360 game to play. And I got to experience this just days before I had to put that list out, and I had to include it. But I really wanted to own this game for two reasons. First of all, there's a moment in the game that really highlights just how important control, or lack thereof, is to a player. And that makes it a very historically noteworthy game to me. But the other reason is it's a game that starts with a Q, and my collection didn't have one of those, so now I have a completely alphabetical collection. Someday I'm going to have to get Quest 64 to help, strengthen the Q, but I don't want to play Quest 64 ever again, so I'm not really in a rush to do that. But this is actually a really solid horror FPS. It's got some cool mechanics that sort of shift halfway through the game. It's got a nice use of lighting. It's very clunky and clumsy nowadays, but I think for the time it was quite a remarkable game. And it came with a copy of Quake 2, which my copy still has, so that's cool. Next, we have a game I made an active point to get, Blue Dragon. This was an Akira Toriyama RPG on the Xbox 360. I vaguely remember the anime at the time, although I don't think I ever really watched much of it. It's sort of like an Akira Toriyama skinned version of Persona. You've got a group of 3 kids who have like these shadows that are monsters that are sort of doing all their magic attacks and stuff for them. You can give them different classes and stuff to build them up. It's an interesting game. It's pretty fun, and definitely one of the more noteworthy RPGs on the Xbox 360, I think. And I think that one's probably going to go up in price a fair bit. Alright, the next game we have, Deathsmiles. I have always wanted to collect all the cave shooters on Xbox 360, and I'm actually pretty close. I think the only ones I'm missing at this point are Espagaluda 2 and Muchi Muchi Pork, which that one is like $500, so I will probably not get that, and that's the one I've always wanted, so that's fun. But this is a horizontally scrolling shooter based on little, like, girls in dresses shooting monsters and sort of a horror-ish aesthetic with sort of a gothic thing going on. It's very unique, aside from the fact they made a sequel to it. If you don't want to try and track down an Xbox 360 copy, and they can get a little pricey, it was remade for, I think, Steam. I know it's on Switch, but there's a remade compilation that contains the sequel to this. You might want to get it there. It would probably be far more sensible if you did. But it is a cave shooter. I'm not a big fan of the horizontal scrolling shmups all that much, but it's pretty fun. And just in general, it's one of the more unique titles for the system, I think. Alright, following that up, we have, in similar vein, Akai Katana, which is a horizontally scrolling shmup by Cave. This is one of the more affordable ones on the system, and that's all relative, but unlike, say, Dodonpachi or Mushihime-sama, it doesn't cost hundreds of dollars just yet. Akai Katana is also available on everything, but it is a horizontally scrolling shmup with sort of a samurai theme on, like, World War I planes. It's a neat game. I like it a lot. Again, Cave does shoot-em-ups right. I think they're kind of the best company for them in general, aside from maybe Compile, which don't even exist anymore, although they are part of Sega, as I understand. But yeah, if you want to collect some cool shmups on the Xbox 360, you've got some options with these two, and they're available on everything else because they've been remade, so it's cheaper and more affordable to get them that way. Okay, we got another game I got at the garage sale with Quake 4. Silent Hill Downpour. I paid $2 for this, and apparently it costs a fair bit more than that, so I might have to sell this at some point. But I liked Silent Hill 2 an awful lot. I haven't really played any of the other ones, though, so I figured, you know, this might be a fun one. I think the one I really wanted to play was... I can't remember. There was another one that I think was either on the Wii or Xbox 360 I really wanted to play that I got confused with this one. But I got this one for basically nothing. 2 blocks away from the house I bought it, I was looking on eBay just to see, like, how much does this game go for? It's a lot more than I paid for, so it might be a fun thing to take a look at sometime, but it might be something worth keeping just for the collector value of that. And for the last Xbox 360 game, we have a game I'd wanted for a very long time, and kind of, sort of, I kind of panic bought, but then there's kind of a funny story. We have The Dark Messiah of Might and Magic. So this is a first-person immersive sim on the Xbox 360. It's based on the Might and Magic universe, which I don't have a lot of experience with. I think I've played one other game in the series, and I mean, I don't think it's connected in any meaningful way, but it's a first-person action game. But the funny thing is, 2 days after I ordered this on eBay, for Christmas, someone got me a Steam copy. And I'm sitting on it waiting to review it. I kind of want to do it sort of soon, because that game looks awesome, but I just haven't had time to get to it yet. But yeah, I didn't have to wait for shipping. I just had an instant gratification copy. But I'm pretty excited about this, but I'm a little hesitant too. If I remember correctly, this game is made by Arcane. And Arcane's games, to me, always seem like they're good on paper, and I just hate them. Like, I played Dishonored, and I love Thief, so I was like, oh, it's a new kind of Thief-inspired game. Dishonored was one really good level. And if you played non-lethally, which the game kind of wanted you to, if you wanted the good ending, you had to play with basically none of the fun toys of the game. You just had your little crappy crossbow, and that's about it. Whereas, you know, that was a game that had 1,000,001 really interesting creative weapons and things to do with, and you couldn't enjoy them. Which is ironically the same problem I have with Deus Ex Human Revolution. You know, it's a game that has so many tools, and you just can't use them if you want to play the game the way the game wants you to play it. I never got that mentality. But then I played Dishonored 2, and I got bored pretty early on that one. I played Prey and thought it was a really weak sequel to Prey, even though it wasn't really a sequel to Prey, and it killed a sequel to Prey that looked kind of interesting. Prey by Arcane was just kind of boring. I have no interest in playing Redfall, but I played Deathloop, and that was a game that was a massive letdown. So I'm a little weary of this, but after I play this, Arx Fatalis, and I guess Redfall, I've played their entire catalog, and, well, maybe this one will surprise me. I am genuinely excited about this, but, again, Arcane's games, to me, always seem interesting, and should appeal to me, and just I dislike them intensely, and I have no real explanation as to why. It's just, I do not like the way they make games. Okay, we got one PS3 game here. Quantum Theory. I bought this because it was just cheaper to buy a PS3 copy than a Xbox 360 copy. But again, this was me trying to get games that might be harder to get now that digital stores are closing. And this is the most boringest third-person shooter you could ever play by Koei Tecmo. You play this gruff man guy who's, I think, part demon or something, who's just better than everyone else, so everyone dies around him, but he's too manly to do it, and he just wanders around taking out demons in these giant towers, and it is the most generic experience ever. I would have put this on my poop of the year list if I even bothered to remember that I played it. It was so boring. But it kind of had one interesting mechanic where you had like a partner that you could sort of command to do stuff, but it didn't really work all that well, and you were very, very limited with what you could do. Yeah, it was just a very generic third-person shooter. Okay, we got two Switch games. I'll show them off at the same time because they're both Mario. We got Super Mario Wonder and Mario RPG. Yes, there we go. I played Super Mario RPG once as a kid, and I always wanted to like play it again, but a copy is real expensive, and I doubt I'll ever find a Super Nintendo copy. But having to play it here on the Switch, it was a lot of fun. It was a great reminder of a game I really, really enjoyed. Fantastic soundtrack, great characters. I really like this game a whole lot. Maybe I'll stream it at some point, but weirdly enough, Mario has an animation change between versions, because in the original version, if I remember correctly, he flashes the peace sign, and they removed that. And I cannot for the life of me understand why. Just weirdest, most arbitrary change ever. Super Mario Wonder is one of the few really good Mario games that feels kind of sort of unique and like new. And I like that. The thing I like less about it, however, is the fact that the thing that makes it unique and interesting is like the warping world around you when you find like the secrets to every world. But the thing is, while that makes each world interesting, you also know that they're all going to be there, so it makes it unbelievably predictable. So I'm kind of two minds with Mario Wonder. On one hand, it's one of the best Mario games that's come out in years. On the other hand, the thing I like about the game is also the thing that makes it kind of unlikable to me. It's weird, but I like this game a lot. It was fun, it had some challenge, and you can play a whole mess of different characters, so there's always a character you can actually enjoy playing in this game. And that's really, really cool. Alright, next we have a PS1 game. We have this thing. This is, if I remember correctly, 3D shooting Sukaru. The best way I can describe this is by describing another Japanese exclusive game you've probably never played, but it's kind of like Dazemon. If you're not familiar with Dazemon, Dazemon was a shooting game that kind of dates back to the Famicom, but it was on the Super Famicom, it was on the Genesis, it was on the Saturn, it was on the PS1 twice, kinda. It's even on PSN right now, and you can download it for Western release. It's not in English, but you can download it. And Dazemon was weird because it was a game that contained like a short little shooting game, and that was okay, but the real meat and potatoes of it was that it was tools to develop your own shooting game. And this is basically that, but for third-person rail shooters, which effectively makes it DIY Star Fox. And that to me is interesting, and I want to talk about this game. And at some point I'm going to sit down and actually try and learn the tools and maybe make a video on this. But I thought this game was interesting for an import perspective. It wasn't super expensive, and I've been trying to find a copy for a while, but I just couldn't find a copy at a price I liked. But I found one that was at a decent price, and I said, alright, that'll be a cool video down the line. So yeah, we've got DIY Star Fox, and that's pretty cool. Alright, next we have some Super Nintendo games. We have Fire Striker. This is a game I have wanted for a very, very, very long time. The best way I can describe it is Breakout, but with a fantasy sort of RPG theme. Like, you're running around as one character while you have a second character sort of guarding the exit like a paddle, and you have to push the ball through each stage until you eventually fight a boss. The ball control in this game is absolutely abysmal, but I think that the concept of an RPG Breakout game kind of makes it work. And that's coming from someone who absolutely hates Breakout games. It reminds me a little bit of Whiz Orb. I gotta play that game again, but this game is rare, it is hard to find, it is expensive, but I found a really cheap copy, and this was a game I'd wanted for a very long time, so I made a move, and yeah, I'm pretty proud I did, because I think it's one of the better games I've played this year, especially on the Super Nintendo. Our next game is kind of a weird anomaly for me. We have Tecmo Secrets of the Stars by Tecmo. You'll never guess who made this, but it might be Tecmo. It's a Tecmo RPG from a Tecmo RPG series. Tecmo. I don't know why they decided to throw their name in every game they ever put out. Just look up Tecmo, what is it, Soccer Championship Game or whatever, which was a rebrand of Captain Tsubasa. Either way, this is weird because it's a Super Nintendo RPG. Now, I'm an RPG guy. I'd like to think I know RPGs pretty well. I know nothing about this game. I didn't know anyone who knew anything about this game. This was just a weird sort of black hole of information that I couldn't find anything about. So I went and grabbed a copy because I found it super cheap. It's usually pretty expensive and hard to find. It's not great. I didn't get very far. I remember early on you have to find a location on a map that's entirely invisible, which is a bad sign. And the combat is pretty average. I haven't sunk too much time into this, but it's largely unremarkable, if not very good. But it's weird, and at some point I want to talk about it just because I feel like it's one of those games no one really talks about. Okay, next we have Gundam Cross Dimension 79. I'm not gonna lie, I bought this exclusively because, well, I shouldn't say that. I saw it on eBay a couple of years ago, and this particular copy never sold, and it was super cheap. So I always had my eye on it, but I made a video on, what was the Gundam game? It was 0080, if I remember, on PS3, and someone commented that just no one on the internet has ever really talked about this game. So I made a point to get it and try it, and there is an actual English translation for it that I played. It's a strategy game, but it is like the weirdest paced strategy game ever. You have 3 playable characters, the Gun Cannon, Gun Tank, and Gundam, but every turn you can only move one character at a time. So having the extra characters is largely redundant because you'll only ever be able to use one character. And weirdly enough, it tries to adhere to the plot of Gundam, so half the time your teammates are just not there. So why would you ever use a character that's not the Gundam? You need the Gundam for basically everything. But then the weird thing happens, and halfway through the game, the story shifts to a completely different, unrelated story that carries over the stats from your previous playthrough, but your main character from the first story, Amuro, his stats don't carry over to the protagonist of the second game. Instead, it's the side character Kai's stats that carry over to the character from the second game. So if you didn't use Kai at all, you will die instantly because they expect you to be about level 20 by that point. That's bad. But again, the entire main story requires you to play as Amuro basically exclusively, so you can't build up Kai at all. And it just has some really, really bizarre things. Like, you run into enemies that look identical to one another, but they have wildly different stats. There's multi-phase bosses that will just cheat. Like, if you go up against the Elmeth, she'll have 4 bits out. 2 bits are weak to physical attack, 2 bits are weak to ranged attack. You can't tell the difference between the two. Every single one of those enemies gets to move and attack you that turn, and you get to move once. It's a mess, and it's painful, and it's just awful. It is an awful, awful strategy game, and somehow it got a sequel. But weirdly enough, it doesn't continue the story that ends on To Be Continued with the character from the second story here. It's just a retelling of Zeta. So, I don't know, everything about this game is a giant question mark of why, and I've played it. That game is rough. Following that up, we have Gundam F91. I kind of want to talk about this game as well. It's a strategy game, but it's based on F91, except it's not. And this is what makes me so interested in this, because it's not based on F91, you know, the thing it's named after. It's based on F90, which was a spin-off manga of F91 that had a completely different protagonist, completely different suits. The only reason they call it F91 is, I assume, for marketing, but you don't get the F91 until, like, I think, like 3 levels from the end, so it's not even an F91 game. This game is utterly bizarre, and it's weird because it's an absolutely beautiful game and a horribly ugly game at the same time. I want to talk about this game at some point, but it's something to talk about. It was cheap. I don't think it's all that good, though. Alright, next we have Lufia 2, Rise of the Sinestrals. I played the original Lufia a couple of years ago, and it was on my Game of the Year list. Lufia 2 was absolutely amazing, and I'm still working through my playthrough on Twitch right now. Go check that out, I guess. But I remember thinking this game was really, really fun. When you beat the game, you unlock a mode that's basically just a mystery dungeon randomized roguelike. There's multiple gameplay modes for every time you beat the game. There's a weird Pokemon mechanic where you raise a monster that evolves as you feed it. You can completely ignore that for some reason. There's a lot going on here that it's just very, very weird, but it's weirdly confident about how it handles itself as a game. And it kind of feels like a prototype of Wild Arms, and I love Wild Arms, so I kind of have to love this. This game is great. Unfortunately, it's a very puzzle-heavy game, and I am dumb. So that's less good. I have been stuck on quite a few puzzles in this game, but I think this game is quite remarkable. And if you're collecting NES or NES Super NES RPGs, you should grab this game because it is pretty remarkable. Okay, last Super Nintendo game we have, Breath of Fire. I'm really more familiar with the Game Boy Advance port of this, but I kind of want to get all the big Super Nintendo RPGs, and I'm pretty close. Breath of Fire 2 is pretty much it offhand that I think I still need. But this game is okay. It's a pretty interesting little Capcom RPG. For some reason it says Squaresoft here, but it's a Capcom game. I think they may have published it. But either way, Breath of Fire was a pretty interesting little RPG. I think the sequel's a lot better, but if I'm being honest, the Breath of Fire game I'm actually interested in is the third one. I saw it in a magazine when I was a child, and I always wanted to play that game because of a very strong image I saw. And I've just never been able to track down a copy. Someday I'd like to be able to play Breath of Fire 3, but until then I kind of want to familiarize myself with the rest of the series. And this is a start for that. And for the last game we have here, we have the one PC Engine CD I bought on my own, or rather Turbo CD game, Final Zone 2. Final Zone 2 is kind of like Ikari Warriors, except it's on the PC Engine. It has a bunch of different characters, and because this is an actual TurboGrafx CD, this is Western released. So the thing you have to understand is there was a grand total of 1 TurboGrafx CD game that was ever localized with any degree of competency. And that was the launch title Ys Books 1 and 2, where they actually hired proper, professional, fairly well-known voice actors to like play the characters because they really wanted to do it right. But then it was kind of pretty obvious early on that, oh yeah, no one bought the TurboGrafx in the West. Even if you were going to buy an expansion for it, why are we dumping all this money into localization and voice acting? Let's just get Mike and his buddy from the accounting department to do all the voices. And that's how you get dubs like Final Zone 2, where the voice actors probably never voice acted before, probably haven't voice acted since, and it's hilariously bad. That's pretty much the entire TurboGrafx CD library that had English audio, but the weird thing about this one is while it does have a hilariously bad dub, there are 2 vocal tracks in the soundtrack that had also been localized, and weirdly enough, they slap. Like, I have no idea why, but it seems like they couldn't hire voice actors to save their lives, but they could hire a singer to actually sing the vocal tracks, and did an actually kind of interesting job. The localization of this game is rather quizzical, despite the fact it's pretty much just an average Ikari Warrior style game. But that said, it was a game I really wanted to get for TurboGrafx. It usually costs a real lot of money, like all Turbo CD games do, but this one I got for 30 bucks. And even though I didn't really have the money for it, at that price, that is buying it for like a fifth of what it normally goes for, and I kind of couldn't say no to that. This is definitely one of the bigger games for the Turbo CD I wanted to get. It's not the highest on my list, but at that price, I kind of had to go for it. Now, of course, we do have one more thing to do. And now, we have to ask the all-important question. Just what is in the treasure chest of awesome? Let's open it up and find out. We have 2 games. So let's start this off. This is Chrono Trigger on the Super Nintendo. This is probably the worst financial decision I have ever made in my life. But to be fair, I did it with incomplete information. So as I said, I lost my job at the start of the year. I bought this 3 days before I learned I was losing my job. This is not a cheap game by any means or measure, but in my defense, I was told I had 4 months worth of work ahead of me still. And frustratingly enough, when those 4 months were over, my boss called me and asked why I hadn't submitted time, even though she told me that I was done 4 months ago, and I'm still quite angry about that, because I could at least have a nest egg or something. But Chrono Trigger is a game that always meant the absolute world to me. I rented it, I think, twice, and it was actually my first RPG, and when I first played this, I absolutely hated it. Because I knew it was an amazing game, but I just didn't want to interact with the fact that as an RPG it was a numbers game, and it wasn't until I played a different RPG much later on that I learned to really like them. I was trying to avoid every single fight because I didn't want to waste time. I wanted to see this amazing story with these great characters. And I kind of got curb stomped by like the 3rd boss of the game and couldn't pass it as a kid, and I never had a chance to finish. This was a game I always wanted to find, and it was a very expensive game. And I worried that it was going to be like my most wanted game of all time, Panzer Dragoon Saga, a game that just increases in price exponentially to the point where I'll never be able to play it. So I saw a copy on eBay fairly cheap, relatively speaking, and I decided to buy it with the understanding I had about a quarter of a year left to my contract, and I could make a little bit of money left, and I had one opportunity to get this, and I went for it. I proceeded to stream this on Twitch, and it was an absolute blast to finally play through to the ending of Chrono Trigger. And I got to put up a review of it too, and that was a very special review for me. I love Chrono Trigger. It is one of my all-time favorite games, and it is just an amazing game for what it is. But it was a very stupid financial decision if you went into this understanding that I was losing my job 3 days before me buying it. But I did not go into that knowing that, so I still think I made the right decision with the knowledge I had. Now, the next game we have was my Christmas gift for last year from my brother. And the thing you have to understand about my brother is he will get you the best presents ever, and they will always be something random you will never think of. He's kind of amazing like that. Just keep it between you and me that I think he's actually pretty amazing. But this was something he got while he was on vacation. Now, what is this exactly? Well, you might say it's Jet Set Radio in Japanese, and you're kinda right, but not actually. See, this is Dela Jet Set Radio. So what's Dela Jet Set Radio? This is, after all these years, still the definitive way to play Jet Set Radio, even including the HD version that came out a decade ago that Sega just ripped from the internet. Thanks for that, by the way, Sega. This was still the better version because that version had soundtracks cut. See, the thing you have to understand about Jet Set Radio is when it released in Japan, it actually only had like 3 or 4 levels. And then when they brought it to the West, they changed some of the songs on the soundtrack and added 2 additional levels. One of them is my favorite level in the game, one of them is objectively the worst level in the game, but still, you know, they added 2 extra levels. And then Japan sat there and said, well, the West has like a different soundtrack for each region, and they have extra levels, and suddenly our version of this game is no longer definitive, and we can't have that. Japan always has to have the best stuff, obviously. So they basically took the soundtracks of every version, the extra levels, and they crammed them all into one, which is more than the HD version ever did because it actually cut soundtrack as well. I think there's an extra character in this one as well. But the short version of it is, this is basically the amalgam of every version of Jet Set Radio all in one. And what's even better about this? It's actually in English. Despite this being a Japanese version of this game, it is in English. It will read your system language and put it in your language so you can play this in English. The only thing in this game that isn't in English is it uses the Japanese voice actors for the basic jumps and grunt sounds from your characters. So Beat no longer says nice every time he jumps, and I laugh because he's like, nice! And it's one of the most quotable things about that game, if I'm being honest. So yeah, you don't get the English grunts and jump sound effects, but everything else is in English. You get all the Japanese soundtrack, all the European soundtrack, all the North American soundtrack, you get the North American levels. You just get everything. There has never been a version of Jet Set Radio that compares to this, to my knowledge. And I'm a big fan of Jet Set Radio, so this was a... Well, let's put it this way, okay? This is easily the best Dreamcast game I've got. Now, that's not saying all that much, because my Dreamcast collection is Blue Stinger and 7th Cross Evolution, but this is amazing. This is something I will treasure for a very long time. Interestingly enough, he was just on vacation and saw this at a pawn shop on the other side of Canada for some reason. Like, how he ran into this, I don't know. But it's easily like the coolest Dreamcast game I own. Possibly the coolest Dreamcast game ever, with maybe the exception of Skies of Arcadia. This means the world to me, and it's easily one of the coolest things I have gotten in the past 2 years or so. Hey y'all, sorry about the interruptions, especially this late on, but as I was editing this, Christmas sorta happened, and as you can imagine, I got 1 or 2 really cool things I'm very excited about I want to throw in here, just so that I don't forget to do it later or I have to start piling stuff up now. So I just figured, you know, I got 2 extra things, I'll just put them in here because they're very cool, I'm very excited about it. So let's do this. So thing number 1 was a present from my brother this year for Christmas, and as I said for you about 2 minutes ago and for me about a week ago, when my brother gets you a present, you will never figure out what it is. It will always be a surprise, and it will always be like the coolest thing ever. And this one I was very excited about because he went on vacation about 7 months ago, and when he came back, he was super, super excited. And you have to understand, my brother is a very reserved person. So if he comes back excited, that means something. And he basically walked in, and the first thing he says, I got you the perfect Christmas present. I want to give it to you right now, but I can't. And this entire year, trying to speculate on what that was has been one of the few constants in my life, and it's been one of the few things that has sort of been one of the few things that has kept me sane when everything in my life is going wrong, like it is right now. Again, I've got a Patreon, go support it so things are a little less crap for me, please. But I opened it, and yeah, my brother's present was perfect. Because what he got me was this. a giant statue of our boy Neku here. Now, if you're new here, Neku has not been sitting in the background for just giggles. He's actually quite an important character to me. I played The World Ends With You when I was about 15. I'm an awkward redhead, and I just really resounded with this character. I was a teen that had no friends. I was very lonely, and I've said this before, but like the first 5 minutes of the game where he's trying to just shut out the entire world, that was like 10 minutes before I played that game for the first time. I even was wearing something that was kind of more or less the realistic depiction of his clothes and his goofy purple headphones. Like, that was me. And it was surreal to see a character going through what was effectively like the past 5 minutes of my life, looking exactly like me. It was surreal. I felt like I was being pranked or something. And I had just resonated with this character so much because his journey through the game, as he learns to open up and trust more people, kind of got me to do it as well. It's a very emotionally impactful game for me, so I've always associated myself with Neku. And that's sort of why I've always had him in the background of these videos, is it's sort of like a signature of mine, so to speak, aside from the fact I've got a giant wall of Gundam. That too is a signature of mine, but it's also a reference to an old reviewers that I really respected. I kind of wanted to sort of take his thing of having like a background thing sort of be your digital signature, and I did that with Neku. With my little crappy Figma that cost way too much money, and now I've got a much nicer, bigger upgrade to it that costs probably a lot more. So I'm very excited with this. I'm not sure how it's going to fit in these videos, but I'm upgrading. This thing is way too cool not to use. So that's awesome. So you can go away now. Now the other thing I've got, I kind of have to be a little bit careful of because it actually has an address on it. But it was a present from my uncle, and it might be one of the coolest presents I ever got. Because what I got was a letter. And this letter was from the 80s. It was addressed to him. The address is no longer valid. I'm going to cover it anyway because I don't know who lives there, but I'm not going to dox them. But this letter's important because it's from Activision. This letter is a preserved letter that was given to people who had applied for the Activision Atari patches. If you don't know what those are, basically you get a high score in an Atari Activision game, and you'd send them a little photo of your TV screen showing that you did this, and you'd hope that you get a response that doesn't get lost in the mail, and inside you'd get a attached letter, and one little awesome thing, a patch. And these patches were the very first achievements of all time. I knew my uncle had this. He showed this to me when I was a very, very small kid. I never knew that he kept the letter, though. In fact, the fact that I have it, I kind of want to make a video just preserving it so people know what that letter said and just see what the old Atari thing was. But this is a very cool piece of gaming history, but it's also sort of a family heirloom. This was something my uncle earned, and he passed it on to me along with that letter. And when I saw this when I was a kid, I absolutely was just enthralled with the idea of something like this. And the fact that he gave this to me, that he has deemed me worthy to inherit this, so to speak, I don't have words for this. This might be one of the coolest gifts I've ever had. Either way, I'm not sure if I'll make a video on that Atari letter. I'm thinking about it just so that we can sort of preserve the writing and stuff, but this is something very, very special to me, and I just wanted to show it all to you and thank my uncle for this, because this is something very, very special. I'm going to keep this in like a fireproof safe that I have, but I love this. Anyway, interruptions over. That said, outside of what's on here, this, absolutely. I want to play the crap out of this right now. I'm not sure I can on my Saturn without modification, and I don't know how to do that, so I guess that's going to light a fire under my butt to figure out how to do that. But holy crap, I want to play this so badly right now. Like, just let me, please. But yeah, either way, this has been a mystery unboxing by Jet Wolf, who had sent me a bunch of cool stuff. Wonderful guy. Go check out his channel. He has some awesome soundtrack stuff. He does some interesting like music art stuff. I help a lot with that. He likes to test out like special effects. He's a really good editor. He's helped me on a few of my videos. I help him on some of his stuff. So go check out his channel because he deserves the subs. He's an amazing guy. And this has been just my collection of stuff I've had over the past 2 years because I didn't think I had enough to make a loot video because I'm broke. I hope you enjoyed, and you know, let me know what your favorite chunk of this loot is. Hell, tell me what your favorite piece of loot you've gotten over the past 2 years has been, because, you know, there's always more awesome games I haven't heard of that I want to hear about. Tell me what you're really proud of that you got, because that'd be cool. Subscribe to the show so that my numbers get bigger, because that's always a nice ego boost for me. If you really want to make my day, check out the show's PayPal or Patreon to help fund me, because buying games with no income is a little tricky. Unless more people like Jet Wolf want to step up and handle that for me. But I appreciate any sort of support that I can get. And once again, big thank you to Jet Wolf for supplying me with some absolutely amazing imports. Some really weird imports I'm going to have to dig into. And some amazing things I'm absolutely going to have to play. Holy crap, Shining Force 3. This is not something I ever thought I'd ever get to play. So that's very exciting. But anyway, I hope you enjoyed this weird loot video. I'm definitely rusty. I haven't done one of these in 2 years. But I hope to see you again on my channel. And until then, peace out, Internet.